Welcome to the Integrity Talks podcast, a platform where we explore what it means to lead ethically, act with integrity, and build trust in both business and society. Today, we're honored to be joined by Natasha Supal, Head of Public Sector and Ethics at the South African Institute for Chartered Accountants. SAICA plays a pivotal role in shaping ethical standards within the accounting profession across the broader economy. Under Natasha's leadership, the organization has deepened its focus on ethical leadership, public sector accountability, and responsible governance. In this episode, we'll unpack the challenges and opportunities in strengthening ethical culture, not just in finance, but in how we operate as institutions, as professionals, and as citizens. We'll also explore how platforms like the Ethical Supplier Platform and collaborations between business and professional bodies like SAICA can help create conditions for more transparent, values-driven economies. Natasha, we're truly excited to have you with us and welcome to the Integrity Talks. If maybe you can just give our audience a brief introduction of yourself and the work that you do at SAICA.
Thank you, Makabo, and good day to everyone who will be watching this podcast. As Makabo said, my name is Natasha Supal. I am the head for public sector and ethics at SAICA, and I actually oversee the SAICA Code of Conduct to make sure that members who apply it have a code to abide to that is relevant and supports the reputation of the profession. I think just some background from a SAICA perspective, as many people would be aware, SAICA, which is the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, is an accountancy professional organization within South Africa. We do have a large number of members, in fact, over 60,000, and these members occupy various positions, from auditors to chief financial officers to risk managers, and they do play a critical role in the economy and in business. Yes, thank you, Makabo.
Okay, thank you for the great introduction and insight into the amazing work that you do at SAICA. So the first question that we have today would be that since we are focusing more on the SME economy, what would you say is the role that ethics play in ensuring a long-term success for SMMEs?
Ethics is quite important for SMMEs, and I think we need to look at it from the perspective of long-term sustainability. It comes with its challenges, but if we look at SMMEs that do thrive and become sustainable in the long term, they generally do have ethical practices in place, and this is for various reasons. An SME that has ethical practices is more likely to attract customers and keep them in the longer term. And if we look at it from an employee perspective, they also attract good skills to the business as well. I think the third thing is from a stakeholder relationship perspective, and many of us would agree that if we were doing business with an SME, we would like to do business with someone who has ethical practices within the organization. And so it's also important from a stakeholder relationship perspective as well.
Okay, that is wonderful. So as SMEs operate within the South African landscape, we do recognize that there are many challenges that they face from various, I would say, indicators, either ranging from sustainability, procurement, diversity, equity and inclusion, whistleblowing, and so forth. So looking at your area of work and how you operate, what would you say are the key barriers to ethical compliance for emerging businesses?
Well, there are a number of barriers, and I think the first one, if we look at, is the regulations and the compliance landscape. It's generally it requires quite a lot of compliance processes to be put into place, and we find that with SMMEs where they do lack resources, there is a challenge from that perspective to actually have processes in place to ensure compliance. So the first one is lack of resources and to enforce compliance. I think the second one, if we can look at it, is the culture within some of the SMMEs where you have employees who would not want to bring in or to implement these processes. And this is for various reasons. Sometimes it's very burdensome. It's additional processes. So there are ways of doing things quicker and they would prefer that. So it's the culture within the SMME that could become a challenge. And I think if we also look at the training perspective and training employees, that also comes with a resource side as well, where you would require more budget for that as well.
Okay, thank you so much. If maybe you can just give us a bit of insight on some of your engagements that we've had with SMMEs and the work that you've done directly with them in terms of developing the SMME landscape in South Africa. Yeah.
We have within SAICA a separate unit that actually deals with supporting SMMEs. In fact, it helps with enterprise development. And that is aimed at supporting SMMEs with best practices. I think if we look at it from internally as well as SAICA, we do have SMMEs which sits on our committees, and through this process, they are able to influence certain advocacy submissions, both to government. And if we look at it from that perspective, in terms of legislation that may impact SMMEs, those SMMEs also have a voice from, when those submissions go in. So I did speak to compliance and regulations earlier and the impact of that. And I think it then becomes important from that perspective that SMMEs have a voice when legislation is being implemented or is being reviewed. To ensure that the SMME voice is taken into account. And I think some of these processes that we do have within SAICA actually allows for that as well.
Okay, wow, that is very wonderful, and the programs sound amazing. So with your engagements with SMMEs, what lessons have emerged that can guide SMMEs for future practice? Basically, what are some of the emerging trends or problems or maybe advice that you can give that can guide SMMEs, seeing that you've worked extensively with various SMMEs and have quite a lot of experience with that?
I think for many SMMEs, we would see in the future as well, and it's impacting everyone. One is technology and the fast moving pace of technology. And I think SMMEs actually struggle to keep up with that. And that is due to various reasons as well. Being an SMME, you have the challenge of ensuring that your business is sustainable whilst trying to overcome other challenges. And sometimes the lack of budget that you may have to implement technology that is relevant at the time becomes a challenge. But having said that, there are certain things that could be put into place by SMMEs. There is a lot of support out there. We do have webcasts at SAICA also that shows you the different types of technology, how it can be used, off-the-shelf technologies as well, which could assist SMMEs and may be a bit cheaper or at if I could say, a reduced cost to the SMME in implementing technology.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I think that information will be very useful for SMMEs that tune in to hear a lot from what a established and respected institution like SAICA has to say, especially regarding the SMME landscape in South Africa. So then the next question from us would then be, how does support from entities like the NBI help build trust and accountability in the sector? And this is coming from you, from the business as well as accounting sector.
The NBI plays a very significant role in supporting SMMEs. I think if we look at, as I discussed, the challenges impacting SMMEs, every they require a lot of help, and the NBI has initiatives that can support them. If you look at it from an ethics perspective, or other aspects that are currently being implemented by NBI. So it actually reduces, or it provides SMMEs with greater access to material, to broaden their knowledge, to be more sustainable, to understand what's the best practices out there. Because otherwise that SMME would not have access to that and would not be able to gain that knowledge that they would be gaining through the NBI as well.
You're completely right, Natasha, because with the Ethical Supply Project, we do have the Tips and Tales Guide, which outlines best practices for SMMEs as well as using case studies. And in addition to that, we do have the digital e-learning platform that SMMEs can use for self-paced learning to, I would say, integrate ethics more into their business environment. So just on an ethical question, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs as well as SMME owners who may feel pressure to compromise their values in order to survive and stay competitive, seeing that the business landscape is quite competitive in South Africa, especially for SMMEs, for contracts and tenders and so forth?
Yeah, I think that question is very relevant, especially for the SMME landscape and the current economy that we are in within South Africa. We've seen a lot of businesses close, but I think if we look, we always talk about profit versus integrity or ethics, and which do you compromise? And I think if we look at it from that perspective, SMMEs who generally look at quick profits and forego the integrity part, they aren't sustainable for a long time. And at some point, it would catch up with them. And I think therefore it becomes important for SMMEs to understand the costs of ignoring integrity in the long run. I would basically advise SMMEs that it's important that you invest in implementing strong ethical controls, to ensure the long-term sustainability of your business, rather than looking at the profits and ignoring the ethical sides, in the short term. So if you would want to continue and build a stronger business in the future, have more customers coming to you and have more stakeholders coming to you, that you actually implement, ethical, processes now.
Okay. Oh, that's amazing. That's such amazing advice. And thank you so much, Natasha. So before we wrap up, I'd just like to hand over to you for a final thought. So you've shared so many valuable insight, not only from the business side, but from the professional accounting environment sector, basically from the real challenges that emerging businesses face in maintaining ethical standards to the structural support needed to build accountability and trust in the sector. So as someone who is deeply engaged in both ethics and public sector leadership, what would you say is the one key message that you'd like to leave with South African SMMEs, especially those trying to build sustainable businesses in a very difficult and often uncertain environment?
Yes, thanks. I think the one key thing is, in a time of desperation, we sometimes do the incorrect thing that can cause problems in the future. And I think a lot of business owners sometimes go through that. And if we look at a business that is unable to pay salaries, you can only imagine what that owner is going through at that time. And I think if we look at it from that perspective, my one key takeaway is that when you are faced with, a dilemma where it actually questions your integrity and your ethical decision making, that at that point in time, you do nothing. You step back. There is support out there. And there are a lot of people that are willing to support you, to find a solution to overcome what you are currently overcoming, and trying to find an ethical solution. So I think that is just the key takeaway, is don't make a decision in a time when you are at your low, and always remember that there is someone out there that is willing to assist. Things could always turn out better later on. So don't compromise your ethics for profit right now. Thanks.
Natasha, what are the current challenges and opportunities in embedding ethics in the supply chain?
Thanks, Makabo. I think that is a very critical question, because if we look at the fraud and corruption that happens currently, supply chain is where it happens, both in private sector and in public sector. And so it is the highest area of risk within an organization. There are various challenges impacting this area from an ethics perspective. And I think why we find this a challenge was, firstly, the cost implications of implementing systems or strong internal controls within the supply chain departments. It requires additional resources. It requires additional investments, and we do understand that SMMEs sometimes don't have these resources to implement these processes to prevent the fraud and corruption that generally happens here. I think the second one is resistance of change, and this deals specifically with the staff that is employed within this area as well. It's sometimes easier not to follow processes and get goods and services procured, and then it becomes a culture issue where we find that processes are not followed. I think if we look at the opportunities, on the other hand, the opportunities generally outweigh the challenges. And if we overcome the challenges, the SMME will generally overcome the problems with supply chain management. The first one we look at is the reputation of the SMME. It actually enhances the reputation of SMMEs. So where you find that there are stronger SEM processes and stakeholders, suppliers, customers identify this, you generally have your business generally becomes more trustworthy. So you get more customers coming to you. There's also the risk mitigation. I did speak to fraud and corruption as well. Strong controls or internal controls within the supply chain unit actually reduces your chances of fraud and corruption. And you also have competitive advantage. Generally, we find that companies that prioritize a supply chain management and ethics thereof attract more customers, like I said earlier. So there is good reasons why you should overcome your challenges to receive those opportunities. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Natasha, for that answer. And you mentioned something that's very important, especially looking at the business and whistleblower landscape in South Africa, where fraud is often rampant in businesses. And when an employee or somebody tries to call it out, oftentimes the whistleblower meets very fatal and often dangerous repercussions. So my question following that is, whistleblowers often face risk when exposing unethical practices, especially within smaller business environments where power dynamics are closely held. So from your perspective, how can the broader business ecosystem promote and uphold accountability and whistleblower protections?
Yes, whistleblowing, if you've seen the news, has become very significant in South Africa. However, some companies have gotten this right, and there is proper whistleblowing processes within the company. If we look at SMMEs, there are various steps that they could implement to ensure that they also have a strong whistleblowing process within the organization. And I think specifically for SMMEs, whistleblowing processes are important because it will actually protect the SMME itself in the long run, from fraud, corruption. So the first thing that we could actually look at is, the governance process. And we look at the governance process, we look at policies and procedures. Are there adequate policies and procedures within the SMME that will allow the organization, its staff, its leadership to follow, should there come a time when there is whistleblowing that needs to take place? And does everyone within the entity understand those policies and procedures, and can it be implemented? The second one is creating a safe reporting environment. We would agree that we would only whistleblow if we feel safe to whistleblow. So the environment needs to be conducive to allow the whistleblower to whistleblow. And therefore it becomes important that the SMME has a safe environment, that employees feel safe, that if they identify an unethical issue, that there is no fear of retaliation from leadership or from anyone else within the organization. I think the third one is training and education. And I think we can't express how important training and education is in this space as well. So regular training and education programs can help employees to understand the importance of accountability and whistleblower protection. And I think there are a number of organizations that actually provide free training from this perspective as well. I do understand that, and SAICA also has an MOU with the Whistleblower House. So some of these processes cannot be done internally because of the lack of resources that an SMME may have, but there are stakeholders externally who may be able to support them. So if you are an SMME and would like to get this type of support, you can also go to the Whistleblower House. If you Google it, you would find the name. And they do provide a wide range of services as well. We also have the Ethics Institute as well that has a number of free guiding documents for whistleblowers. So SMEs can also download that and use those guidance documents instead of, recreating something internally, which would require resources as well.
Thank you, Natasha, as well as thank you, SAICA, for your ongoing leadership and partnerships. Your contributions to this conversation have been incredibly thoughtful, grounded, and inspiring, Natasha. And it's clear that your work is not only influencing the profession, but also shaping a broader culture of ethical leadership in our country. And to all our listeners, especially the SMMEs and entrepreneurs tuning in, thank you for joining us, and we hope that today's episode with SAICA has left you encouraged, informed, energized, and to keep on acting in an ethical manner.